Picture two people. One's a broke bookbinder's kid with zero business becoming a scientist, and pulls it off anyway. The other's a founding father getting played by everyone around him, until he cracks the code on human nature so well, he turns his worst enemy into an ally with one single sentence. Same two skills both times. Absorb power. Read people. That's the whole game. And today, from the book Mastery, I'm breaking down exactly how they did it. All right, welcome back. Last video, we broke down the apprenticeship, the grind, the reps, the boredom you gotta eat before anybody takes you seriously. If you haven't seen that one, go watch it. This one's built right on top of it. But today, we're going somewhere most self-help content never touches. Two brutal, honest concepts straight from the book. Concept 1. Absorb power, the mentor dynamic. How the greatest minds in history stole power from the best people alive to fast-track their own greatness. Concept 2. Read people, social intelligence. How to see people with such clarity that nobody can manipulate you, blindside you, or hold you back ever again. Buckle up. This one's deep. The Faraday story. London, early 1800s. A kid named Michael Faraday is born into a family with 10 mouths to feed and a father too sick to work most days. By the rules of his world, his life is already written for him. Manual labor, poverty, obscurity, the end. But there's something wrong with this kid in the best possible way. His mind won't sit still. He becomes a bookbinder's apprentice at 12, and the shop owner does something small that changes everything. He lets Faraday read every single book that passes through his hands. One night, Faraday opens a passage on electricity. This invisible force, something you can't see but can feel, measure, control. And something inside him just ignites. He decides, right there, I'm going to be a scientist. Understand how insane that is. Science, back then, belongs to rich kids with university degrees, not bookbinders' apprentices. But Faraday doesn't back down. He starts attending public lectures obsessively, taking notes so detailed, so beautifully organized, that they turn into his own homemade scientific encyclopedia. That notebook lands in front of a member of London's most elite science institution, and it blows him away. He gets Faraday a ticket to watch the most famous chemist in England, Sir Humphrey Davy, lecture live. Faraday goes. He's mesmerized. And then comes the gut punch realization. Reading about science is not the same as thinking like a scientist. All the books in the world can't give him that. Only proximity to someone who already has it can. So he does something most people are too afraid to do. He writes Davy, begging for any job, even the lowest one in the building. Silence. Weeks turn into months. Nothing. Then, Davy gets temporarily blinded in a lab explosion. He needs someone to take notes for him. And out of nowhere, Faraday gets the call. That's the crack in the door. And what Faraday does with it next is the exact blueprint we're breaking down right now. Why we resist mentors. Here's something most people won't admit out loud. We live in a culture that worships the self-made story. Nobody helped me. I did it all on my own. It sounds powerful, but Greene says something that stings a little. That attitude is usually rooted in insecurity, not strength. Ask yourself honestly, when you imagine asking someone for help, what's the first feeling that shows up? For most of us, it's shame. Like admitting, I need guidance is admitting I'm not enough. But needing a mentor doesn't say anything bad about you. It just means you're early. Jordan had Dean Smith. Kobe had Phil Jackson. Every single master you've ever admired was somebody's student first. Your most creative years, Greene points to your late 20s through your 40s, are limited. You either spend them fumbling in the dark, or you find someone who's already walked the path and cuts years off your learning curve. That's not weakness. That's strategy. The alchemy of knowledge. Now here's where this gets almost mystical. Greene compares real learning to alchemy, the old legend of trying to turn dead metal into gold. Raw information, on its own, is that dead metal. Flat. Lifeless. You can read it 100 times, and it still won't move. It only comes alive when something heats it up, and that something is a mentor. Faraday didn't just read Davy's theories. He mixed Davy's chemicals with his own hands. He watched the exact way Davy's fingers moved during an experiment. He caught the rhythm of how Davy thought when something went wrong. 8 years of that. 8 years of pure alchemy. And Faraday discovers electromagnetism, one of the biggest breakthroughs in the history of science. It didn't come from textbook. It came from standing close enough to feel the heat. Think about it in your own life. You can watch 100 cooking videos on your phone, but the second a real chef grabs your hand and fixes your knife grip in person, something clicks that no screen ever could teach you. That's the whole difference between information and transformation. Attracting a mentor and choosing the right one. So how do you actually get one of these people to invest in you? First, bring value before you ask for anything. Davy already knew about Faraday's insane work ethic and his beautifully organized notebooks before they ever met face to face. Don't walk in with your hand out. Walk in already useful. Second, don't be too proud for the small stuff. Faraday's entire big break was note-taking for a man who couldn't see. Not glamorous, not something you'd post about, but it got him in the room, and the room is all that matters. Third, and this is the part almost nobody talks about, the emotional bond is what actually makes the learning stick. When you genuinely admire somebody, your mirror neurons light up, and you start absorbing their whole way of thinking, not just their words. This isn't manipulation. It's just how human beings are wired. And picking who to learn from matters more than you'd think. Greene brings up Aristotle and a 13-year-old prince, a kid you now know as Alexander the Great. His father didn't pick a war general to train him. He picked a philosopher who'd mastered dozens of fields because he wanted Alexander to learn how to think, not just one skill. That single decision shaped one of the greatest conquerors in human history. So don't just chase the loudest name in your industry. Chase the person who will rewire how your brain solves problems, not just teach you one trick. And one more thing, because I know some of you are thinking it right now. What if you genuinely have zero access to a real mentor? Books can become a temporary one. That's literally how Faraday started. A self-help book called Improvement of the Mind became his silent teacher before Davy ever entered the picture. Argue with it in your head. Write in the margins. Make it feel alive. Translate all this to today, right now, this week. You don't need a bookbinder's apprenticeship. Send a DM. Send the cold email. But don't open with, "Can you mentor me?" That's asking for free labor before you've given any. Open with something specific you already did with their work, or one real question that shows you actually studied them. Value first, ask second. That's the modern version of Faraday's notebook. The father figure and cutting the master. Now here's the part of this chapter that hits different, because it's less business advice and more raw psychology. A mentor, almost every single time, ends up playing the role of a father figure in your life. Guidance, structure, protection, but sometimes control too. There's an old Spanish fencing phrase Greene brings up, al maestro, cuchillada. To the master goes the knife. It describes that exact moment when the student finally becomes skilled enough to cut away and build something of their own. Let that land for a second, because it's not betrayal. It's literally the entire point. Your job was never to stay a student forever. Your job, Greene says outright, is to eventually surpass your mentor. Faraday eventually outgrew Davy completely. And today, be honest, way more people know the name Faraday than Davy. For quick strategies. Now let's move fast, because there's 4 more real strategies packed into this chapter, and every one of them is backed by a true story. Frank Lloyd Wright was stuck under a boss whose old-fashioned style he literally cringed at every single day. So he chased down the architect Louis Sullivan instead, someone actually pushing the field forward. 5 years under Sullivan built the entire foundation for everything Wright would become. Carl Jung sought out Freud, even though he had real doubts about some of Freud's core ideas. And that friction? It didn't destroy the relationship. It sharpened Jung's thinking so completely that when they finally split, he was fully ready to build his own school of psychology from scratch. Quick gut check. Which one of these sounds like you right now? Stuck under the wrong boss, like Wright? Or you've got the right mentor, but you keep butting heads with them, like Jung? Either way, keep listening, because there's a version of you in the next few stories too. Here's 2 more, and pay attention, because this next part is about picking the right fit, not just the biggest name. Neuroscientist V.S. Ramachandran got obsessed with a professor's book as a med student. Then years later actually met the guy in person, watched him run wild, theatrical science demonstrations, and knew instantly, this is my guy. He literally moved into the professor's house to soak up his style of thinking. Robotics pioneer Yoki Matsuoka found that same click with a professor who never handed her answers, who just let her make her own mistakes and find her own way. Both of them proved the same point. Don't chase the biggest reputation in the room. Chase the person whose approach actually fits how you think. There's also a quieter, deeper strategy Greene calls gazing into the mentor's mirror. Zen monk Hakuin Zenji became consumed with fear as a boy, terrified after hearing a sermon about the afterlife. That fear pushed him towards serious spiritual training, and under his teachers, part of the whole practice was using their wisdom as a mirror, sitting with his own fear until he actually understood where it came from. Translate that to your life right now. Sometimes the biggest gift a mentor gives you isn't new information at all. It's a reflection. One good question at the right moment that suddenly shows you your own blind spot. That kind of self-awareness might be the single most underrated ingredient in mastery. And one more thing before we move on. You don't need just one perfect mentor. You can have several, each one filling a different gap in your knowledge. That's not disloyal. That's smart. Pianist Glenn Gould listened completely to his teacher, fully open, fully receptive, but every time he played, he subtly bent every idea toward his own instincts. Over years, that small, constant bending added up into something entirely original. He absorbed everything and still never became a copy. As Leonardo da Vinci put it, poor is the apprentice who does not surpass his master. Last one, boxing trainer Freddie Roach learned under legend Eddie Futch. Then years later train a raw, one-dimensional fighter from the Philippines named Manny Pacquiao. At first, it's the usual dynamic. Roach teaches, Pacquiao absorbs. But as Pacquiao improved, something shifted. He started giving input back, improvising moves mid-fight that Roach would study and build entirely new strategies around. The relationship stopped being one-directional. It became electric. Together, they built one of the greatest boxers in history. And if you're sitting here thinking, I have no mentor, nobody around me is doing what I want to do, that's not a dead end. That's the Thomas Edison path. Poor, no formal schooling. Edison turned Michael Faraday's own written work, the same Faraday from the top of this video, into his silent mentor, and built himself into one of history's greatest inventors through pure, relentless discipline. No mentor doesn't mean no path. It just means you read more and you work harder than everybody else in the room. Now here's the part of this book that Greene doesn't let you ignore. You can have the best mentor alive. You can absorb every ounce of their power. And you can still torch your entire career if you can't read people. So let's talk about the skill that protects everything you just built. The Benjamin Franklin story. Young Benjamin Franklin is working under his controlling older brother James in a print shop, dying to prove himself as a writer. His brother won't publish him, so Franklin secretly writes as a fictional widow named Silence Dogood, and the letters become the most popular thing in the whole paper. Proud of himself, he confesses. Big mistake. His brother turns cold, even abusive, and Franklin flees to Philadelphia with nothing. There, a governor promises to fund his own printing shop, sends him all the way to London chasing that promise, and the money never comes. It was a total lie. Franklin stuck, broke, in a foreign country. Then, working in a London print shop, his own co-workers start sabotaging his work, blaming it on a ghost, until he finally realizes the real problem is him refusing to pay into their beer fund. He gives in. The ghost disappears instantly. After all of this, Franklin has a brutal realization about himself. With his work, he's ruthlessly rational, always self-correcting. But with people, he keeps getting blindsided over and over. And he decides, right there, to fix it for good. If you've ever been blindsided by a friend, a boss, a business partner who turn out to be completely different than you thought, the next 4 minutes are going to explain exactly why that keeps happening to you. Stay with me. The naive perspective. Here's the concept underneath everything Franklin went through, what Greene calls the naive perspective. As kids, we're totally dependent on our parents, so our brains get wired to idealize them, to see them as stronger and more perfect than they really are, because the alternative feels too dangerous to process. We carry that exact same emotional lens into adulthood, projecting it onto bosses, coworkers, mentors, instead of seeing people as they actually realistically are. That's exactly why we get blindsided. We assume people want what we want. We convince ourselves our boss secretly loves us or secretly hates us, based on nothing but our own insecurity. Social intelligence means dropping that childish lens completely and seeing people with total clarity, not idealizing them, not demonizing them, just seeing them exactly as they are. Franklin's fix was brilliant in its simplicity. He decided to mentally step inside other people's heads before reacting, using the exact same skill he'd used to write as that fictional widow. Think through their fears, their pride, their self-interest, before making a single move. He got tested on this almost immediately. Back in Philadelphia, his old boss, Samuel Keimer, still bitter about being ditched for London, offers him a friendly-sounding job training 5 new employees. Instead of taking it at face value, Franklin steps back and reads it from Keimer's side, a proud, insecure man plotting revenge, planning to drain Franklin's knowledge into the new hires and then cut him loose. So Franklin plays it cold and smart, quietly builds his own relationships with customers, learns new skills on the side, trains one employee into a loyal ally, and the moment he senses Keimer is about to fire him, he walks out first and opens his own shop, taking the customers and his best-trained assistant with him. No anger, no drama. Just clear, calculated reading of the whole board. Ever wonder why this trick actually works on people's brains? Here's the science. Way back, our ancestors developed mirror neurons, brain cells that let us instinctively sense what other people are feeling without a word being spoken. But because humans stay dependent on their parents for 12 to 18 years, way longer than any other animal on Earth, that same wiring gets hijacked early to idealize authority figures, and we drag that distortion into adulthood, right at the exact moment we most need clear eyes. Greene's whole point, the tools for real social intelligence are already inside you. You're just letting an old childhood habit run the show instead. Years later, sent to France to secure funding for the revolution, Franklin does something that shocks people back home. He dives headfirst into French social life, the parties, the charm, all of it. Critics back home accuse him of going soft. What they missed is that Franklin had studied the French completely and knew exactly what would win them over. He became what they wanted to see, and it worked. He secured the alliance and the funding that arguably saved the entire revolution. That's social intelligence at the highest level, reading not just one person, but an entire culture and adjusting without ever losing sight of your actual goal. And remember that one sentence I promised you back at the top of this video? Here it is. A rival politician named Isaac Norris was attacking Franklin publicly, hard, relentlessly. Instead of fighting back, Franklin found out the man owned one rare, prized book and simply asked, "Could I borrow that?" Norris, flattered, sent it right over. Franklin returned it with a warm note, and just like that, a bitter enemy became a lifelong political ally. One sentence. That's not luck. That's reading someone's real psychology instead of reacting on emotion. Strategy 1. Speak through your work. Greene gives us 4 core strategies here, and the first one might be the most important. Speak through your work, not through arguments. Compare 2 scientists. Ignaz Semmelweis discovered that doctors washing their hands could cut maternal deaths from childbed fever in half, an actual life-saving discovery. But instead of calmly publishing his research, he got locked into furious arguments with his boss, alienated every ally he had, and eventually wrote an angry, unreadable 600-page rant nobody could get through. He died broke, ignored, and forgotten. Now compare that to William Harvey, who discovered how blood actually circulates through the body, an equally radical idea for his time. Instead of picking fights, Harvey quietly built support among colleagues for years, published a clean, well-argued book, dedicated it respectfully to the king, and simply let the work speak for itself. His theory won completely. His name is remembered as a legend. Same level of genius. Two completely different outcomes. Being right isn't enough. How you present your work to the world decides whether it actually lands. Strategy 2 and 3. Persona and seeing yourself as others do. Second strategy, craft the appropriate persona. Sculptor Teresita Fernandez worked in heavy steel, a field dominated almost entirely by men, mostly alone at night in her studio. When people started projecting mystery and fascination onto her, because they never actually saw the grinding, exhausting process behind her work, she made a sharp choice. Instead of over-explaining herself, she leaned into that mystery. While staying razor-sharp and assertive the moment she spoke about the actual substance of her work. She controlled her own image instead of letting the public write her story for her. Third strategy, see yourself as others see you. Temple Grandin, who has autism, kept getting fired or sabotaged and had absolutely no idea why, until she trained herself to mentally replay her own mistakes from other people's point of view, like watching herself from outside her own body. She realized she'd been bluntly criticizing coworkers, making them feel small and useless. She fixed it methodically, using the same process with audience feedback later on, turning herself from an awkward, robotic public speaker into a genuinely engaging one, purely by studying how she actually came across to others instead of trusting her own biased self-image. Strategy 4. Suffer fools gladly. Fourth strategy, and honestly, my favorite, suffer fools gladly. Every field, every industry, every group chat is full of people who care more about ego, gossip, and short-term drama than actual results. Greene tells the story of poet Goethe, trapped at a royal court, drowning in shallow gossip he couldn't stand. Instead of fighting it, he just listened, smiled, said almost nothing, and secretly used every ridiculous courtier around him as raw material for the novels and plays he'd go on to write. Or take film director Joseph von Sternberg, forced to manage an impossibly vain, difficult actor named Emil Jannings on set. Instead of clashing with him head-on, von Sternberg humored his jealous tantrums, showed up daily to flatter him, and quietly, cleverly maneuvered the situation to get exactly the performance he needed. He never wasted energy trying to change Jannings. He simply worked around him. And here's one more, and it might be the most powerful example of turning fools into fuel instead of letting them win. Linguist Daniel Everett moved deep into the Amazon to study a tribe called the Piraha and learn their language. Years of research led him to a discovery that directly contradicted the famous theories of MIT professor Noam Chomsky. The Piraha language simply didn't fit the universal grammar model Chomsky's entire career was built on. When Everett finally published his findings, Chomsky supporters didn't just debate the science. They came after him personally, ambushing him with hostile questions at conferences, publicly calling him a fraud, even pressuring a radio network to cancel a segment on his work. At first, Everett got emotional, and it showed. He fumbled under the pressure. But then he made a choice. Instead of getting dragged into their game, he used every single attack to make his own work airtight. He anticipated their criticism in advance and addressed it head-on in his writing. The controversy they created actually sold more copies of his book and won him more supporters than he'd ever have gotten on his own. He turned his enemies' foolishness directly into fuel for his own credibility. The lesson across all three stories: you will always encounter fools, people ruled by ego instead of results. Fighting them drains you and changes absolutely nothing. Accept it as part of human nature, protect your energy, and if you're smart, turn their nonsense into fuel, material, motivation, leverage, instead of a distraction that costs you years. Modern translation: you don't need the Amazon or a royal court for this one. Next time somebody at work or in your comments tries to drag you into drama, don't argue back. Let your results talk instead. Stay 2 steps ahead by quietly turning the attack into content, into motivation, into your next win. The reversal, Paul Graham. One honest reversal before we wrap this up. Tech legend Paul Graham straight up hated office politics. genuinely couldn't stomach manipulative social games. But his solution wasn't to force himself into becoming a master manipulator. It was to structure his entire life around avoiding those environments altogether. He built small startups, kept teams lean, and when his company Y Combinator inevitably got bigger, he had his co-founder Jessica Livingston, who was naturally gifted socially, handle the tricky human stuff. Here's the takeaway. If complex office politics genuinely isn't your strength, you don't have to force yourself into becoming a master manipulator. But you still need the basic radar to spot manipulation coming your way. Because the world is one giant social arena, whether you like it or not, and pretending otherwise will only make you more vulnerable, never less. Tying it together. So here's exactly how these two ideas connect. A mentor gives you the skill, the technique, the fire that turns raw knowledge into gold. Social intelligence protects that fire from getting stomped out by politics, jealousy, and misread intentions. You can have all the talent and every mentor in the world lined up behind you. But if you can't read the room, if you're still operating off childhood assumptions about how people work, none of it survives contact with the real world. Mastery was never just about what you know. It's about who guided you there and how clearly you can see the people standing between you and where you're going. So there it is, the bookbinder's kid who absorbed power from a blinded scientist and rewired the history of science forever. And the founding father who learned to read people so well, one single sentence could turn an enemy into an ally for life. Find the right mentor. Absorb everything they've got. Then have the guts to walk away and build something bigger than they ever imagined. And along the way, see people exactly as they are, not how you wish they were. That's mastery. If this hit you, smash that like, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.